Okay, so before we get into all this, we were kind of left before talking about how Kangaskhan was related to Cubone, and it's obviously not a Charmander, so let's kind of explain this. But why is it? Like, okay, with the fact that Guardia's evolution's been scrapped, and obviously the baby Kangaskhan isn't its own Pokemon, it's with its mother. Cubone being that Pokemon would be a little different. So Cubone's a little older than the baby Kangaskhan. So let's say that, you know, with these three Pokemon, how is Kangaskhan really still connected to Cubone? Well, first of all, you know it's connected because of the scrap evolution, but because of time constraints, that's why both these things got disconnected. You got Guardia's evolution was gone, and then obviously Orphan, which was originally 135 in the index number. I know it's a Kangaskhan. It's probably the way they initially were going to have it planned was it was Cubone would evolve into Marowak, Marowak would evolve into Guardia, and then, you know, if there was another Pokemon, if this is right, you would have the separate Kangaskhan would have its baby, would evolve into Kangaskhan, and then this would make sense. And they'd still sort of be connected because they are still one and the same in a way. You'd still find Kangaskhan's hanging around with its baby, and Marowaks would probably, and this would make sense because Kangaskhan is literally Guardia. It would have been the same height and everything. So if that is true, then I do believe it would have just bred with Kangaskhan's, and it possibly Guardia could have been a. It also would have been a male and a female, so it could have bred with Kangaskhan too, and you'd have all these different Kangaskhan babies. That's why there's all these different offsprings. They're still connected though, so that's basically it. But here's how I look at it though now. So the only conclusion we can really think of is that Cubone can still evolve into Marowak. That is true. It's also true that Marowaks and Cubones are male and female. It's still, yes, it is definitely possible that Cubone can still have two mothers. Cubone is Marowak's son or daughter, depending on how you want to look at it. Um, Keep in mind, though, they're not born with the skulls on their head, even though in the games they might. And Kangaskhan's kind of got its own little loophole where it's born a Kangaskhan, you know, an adult Kangaskhan with a baby in its pouch. You know, there's that mechanic. But again, if we think of the behind the scenes, like what we don't see in the games, the mechanics, we can kind of think of lore-wise how this would work. So Marowaks can breed with Kangaskhan's. They would then create male Kangaskhan's could, or not male Kangaskhan, unless Kangaskhan's breeding with Ditto, and there's just maybe male Kangaskhan's that haven't been discovered yet. Maybe we haven't figured that out yet. But as far as the games go, male Marowaks could breed with Kangaskhan. Maybe it's also possible that Kangaskhan could breed asexually. I wouldn't be surprised. They have discovered all sorts of species in real life that are female only, and they're able to sexually reproduce. Every species is different, however. But as far as kangaroos go, for the most part, they reproduce like, you know, you need a male kangaroo. So there are male kangaroos out there. So that leads me to believe that, yes, there could be a male Kangaskhan out there somewhere. Maybe it's a Marowak, or maybe it's a different species. Again, there's so many different offsprings. It's like, think of it in like real life. You know, like say you're an animal lover. You're going to run into this a lot. There's what is known as a crossbreed and a purebred. Purebred animals. If that is the case, purebreds are usually more expensive because they're the actual genetics of that, instead of it being crossbred with, like, let's say a German Shepherd, a Husky, a Great Dane, like talking about dogs in this case, you know. So Kangaskhan being a kangaroo, and then Marowak being another kind of kangaroo, but one that walks instead of hops. But then again, Kangaskhan kind of looks like it jogs, you know, going based on its animation in Pokemon Snap. It looks like it's just jumping around instead. So, but it's a boxing kangaroo. So, but what's interesting though is some people don't really think of it like this. But what's strange is that once the baby gets a little older, they depart. So Kangaskhan, then its baby then becomes its own. See, this is why I believe that Kangaskhan is also its baby. It is related to Kangaskhan and Cubone because the baby leaves the mother after the age of 3. And they say that's really the only time you really hear the mother ever cry. So it's possible that the Kangaskhan's baby then leaves the mother and then grows up to be another Kangaskhan. But here's the thing, though. We only see the adult version of Kangaskhan. So you got the breeded version of Kangaskhan that can later grow up to be a Kangaskhan. But at the same time, though, it's possible that maybe that baby could also be, and you see, and this is really where it gets confusing. Is it possible that a baby Kangaskhan could also be a baby Cubone? Possibly. Maybe a different bred. But it depends, though. They're still related, though, because they work together. They're kangaroos. Maybe cousins and adults, or maybe instead of brother and sister, husband and wife. As they get older, they reproduce together, and other Pokemon can reproduce too. But if we're talking about like pure breeds and trying to resemble really close to the genetics, yes, Kangaskhan is in fact still its own Pokemon. It's possible, it's weird to think, but again, maybe behind the scenes, that maybe Marowak can, at some point, maybe grow to be a Kangaskhan. Maybe not, because there's the argument that Kangaskhan's, because, if you look at Kangaskhan, it doesn't have a skull, like, on its head. But Marowak's skull eventually becomes infused with it. So it's kind of too late for Marowak to really take its skull off. But it's weird, though, because at the same time, though, even in Gold and Silver, there was an animation, and I've actually made a video about this, where it showed Marowak lifting its head up, and you could see that the skull that it wears wasn't necessarily the skull that was infused on its head. It's like because it's a bone collector. Same thing with Cubone. Cubone's not born, like in the games it's born with a skull on its head, but it's possible that that skull was just given to it by its mother. And so that's why I kind of think the mistranslation where they say that, Cubone wears its dead mother's skull on its head, maybe because that's what it was passed down by, and that's all it has, it's its memories of its mother. So it leaves the corpse behind, but it doesn't take its head off and wear it. It just takes the little skull that wherever, because they're bone collectors, they rob graves and all that. So Cubone, yeah, to say that, can Kangaskhan still be a Cubone? Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Baby Kangaskhan could be a Cubone. Maybe, is it possible, and here's another way to really look at it, is it possible that Kangaskhan could have been a Cubone at one point? Or better yet, now put it this way, how is it possible that Kangaskhan could eventually have grown up to be a Marowak at one point? In Marowak adopting children, is it possible? I wouldn't be surprised. What about the opposite? How about, what if somehow that Marowak adopted a baby Kangaskhan? Somehow. There's something to think about. Although, you probably would most likely have a better chance that Kangaskhan, being at 7 foot tall, 7 feet and 2 inches, I believe, the baby Kangaskhan would probably have a better chance of being protected by its mother. It's adopted, or maybe its real mother. Depending on, again, it depends on the route it goes, because that's why it's confusing. So Kangaskhan would have a better chance of protecting its offspring, whether it was adopted by, if you want to say that maybe it adopted a Cubone, or maybe it's its own baby. Again, it really depends. But can we say that Kangaskhan's adopt Cubones? I wouldn't be surprised. So we can, yes, can Cubone have 2 mothers? Yes. But it also depends on the route it's born to. Most Cubones probably only have 1 mother, and chances are it's Marowak. But at the same time, though, there's no doubt that maybe there have been Cubones that have lived in the wild. And then, of course, you've got, like, the predators that chase after it, like the Manabuzz and all that. And those Pokemon are annoying, but you got to think that's what vultures are. They're scavengers. Manabuzz, or what was the Pokemon called? But anyways, So you have to really think what's out there that you don't really think about too much. But I think, yeah, I do think it is possible that Marowaks do breed with Kangaskhan's. They have their own children. Kangaskhan's can also breed with other things. Maybe there's other... Ditto can also turn into a male Kangaskhan and breed Kangaskhan's and have baby Kangaskhan's. And because Ditto has perfected the art of molecular structure, you basically could say it's a purebred Kangaskhan. So, there you go. Male and female Kangaskhan's have their own children through Ditto, of course. And that's not bad because scientists created Ditto as a form of population control. They were trying to save extinct species from actually extinction. Kangaskhan being rare, but even Giovanni always had a Kangaskhan because it was rare, right? So you really got to ask yourself how many Kangaskhan's really do exist. Or maybe they're just good at hiding, you know. Maybe we just don't see them outside the safari zone because that's really where you can catch them. But, you know, like Professor Oak always used to say, you know, even as a Pokemon professor and all his years of traveling and what he's done and all the other professors that were out there, even Professor Oak said he did not know everything. And he was always learning something new. And with that being said, the Pokemon world definitely has a lot more to offer than what we can explain right now. So that's debatable. But yes, Kangaskhan, Cubone, and Marowak are related. And it's just possible that the only reason why we don't see Kangaskhan grow up the way it does is because it's already an adult by the time it hits that age. Whether it's because the baby itself grows up to be the Kangaskhan, or maybe Marowak somehow can evolve into Kangaskhan, but as it gets older. But then again, it still makes you wonder, you know, is the skull on its head still infused, or is it able to take it off, you know? It's kind of debatable still. Although I do think, for the norm though, I do think that Kangaskhan, you have a better chance of the adult Kangaskhan's that you see you can definitely still, it really depends though. You know, if the baby Kangaskhan's are also what grow up to be Marowaks, and, you know, it could also be its mother too one day, you know, and then that baby, and then the cycle will repeat. Once that baby Kangaskhan becomes an adult, then when it finds its own children or something to adopt, it'll be there to help other Pokemon out. So Kangaskhan fighting Manibuzzes or other Pokemon that threaten Cubone, you know, or the babies. You know, yeah, Kangaskhan can obviously kill something with its own hands because it's just that strong. So there you go. It's definitely plausible that Kangaskhan would make for a perfect mother for its strength, its willpower, and then it also works together with other animals too.